So let's move to some of the midterm or off-year election results that happened a couple of weeks ago. And I think, a little bit later on, we'll kind of get into the interior of the Democratic Party, which I was actually on Blogging Heads yesterday talking about some of these issues. And there's a lot of interesting fault
Did you
lines
get to
there.
talk about Governor Hamburglar, New Jersey?
I didn't, but we're going to get right there in a second. So I feel like those are the three things. I think with Bill de Blasio in Boston, and there's some other examples where there was a socialist looks like she's about to get on the city council in Seattle. I mean, there was an anti-austerity, progressive.
That was overall very progressive.
Very progressive. And then
people need to remember again that the Hamburglar himself. Tell me if you put that mask on him, you wouldn't think he was the Hamburglar. Admit it. Okay, that's where we're going to start. Second of all, even he. Did you see? I mean, I came back here to New York for to see my family. Sadly, my dad passed away, and that's the reason I wasn't on the show last week. Yeah. I was able to see some of the campaign ads and some of what was going on here, and all of Christie's ads that I saw was him pretending to be liberal. It was all him hugging people after Sandy.
So he's kind of the fraud, right? Like there's the progressive wave, there's the
like
fraud.
One of us, which is I take care of people who need the government.
Mm-hmm.
That was his message.
Right.
So even he ran. But you're right. What happened in Seattle is huge. The city that I currently live in, Cincinnati, you had some of these Koch brothers like ALEC-based, pension reform that essentially was going to rob working people of these pensions they built up over their lifetimes who worked for the city in Cincinnati, was not only defeated when these guys came in and spent their money, it was defeated 80-20.
That's great.
It was destroyed. All right, their attempt to attack, look at that as in a way almost a proxy for these attacks on privatizing Social Security, because that's about where the population stands, privatization versus Social Security, 80-20. Well, that's how it went down in Cincinnati. There were a lot of progressive victories. Obviously, Bill de Blasio's victory was a huge one.
It was wonderful.
The current state of in Virginia it was huge. We can have our conversation. I'm sure we are going to about Terry McAuliffe's centrist.
Yeah,
instincts,
let's get to that in a minute.
He ran
but first,
in Virginia on gay marriage, on being pro-abortion rights 100%, and on not just supporting a background check, but on supporting an assault weapons ban and supporting limiting magazines, I think, to 10 bullets or less. He ran on a very
and
progressive
taking Medicaid expansion. So, but we'll get back to that in a second. But first, let's the Chris Christie obsession, I think, is just. It's so stunning on so many levels, to use a Sam word, because it's like, just as you're saying right there, his advertising, his re-election campaign was built on thematically progressive and inclusive themes, which is completely belied by his record. The other thing that also is fascinating about Christie is that this is a guy, he's Crips from Obama on every single major address he has. His Republican address in 2012 was a version of Obama's 2004 speech. It's improbable that I'm here. Who would have expected it? Although on the other hand, it's like, well, no, it's actually really not that improbable that like a big obnoxious guy would be governor of New Jersey. And his acceptance speech after his reelection hit these themes of, in his own way, not red, not blue, competent, bringing people together. And it's amazing to me the way, he's Morning Joe's love interest, and everybody has this kind of passion for him.
People like Joe Scarborough and some of these guys, they're just begging. Give me a Rudy Giuliani Republican. Give me a John McCain. These guys.
He's also like a George Bush, I would argue. I mean, in the sense that his policy.
But I'm talking about in terms of image.
Oh, in terms of image, but his record is very right wing, and it's incredibly crony and incompetent. I mean, I just want you to kind of run down the list here on Christie, because it's just incredible the fraud.
First of all, yes, let's run down the list in general.
Yeah.
Which is, first of all, berates people in a nasty way. Whenever anybody disagrees with him, is a pretty vicious guy. He's gone after teachers, cut budgets for all sorts of things, mental health, the rest, has decimated budgets in New Jersey. And, oh, by the way, in a piece recently written for the Daily Beast by Dean Obadella, who I know you've had on this show, his economic record sucks.
Yep.
Okay, which is the New Jersey's unemployment rate is 8.5% right now. All right, it's 41st in the nation. It's 44th in job growth. Its credit rating has been downgraded twice. All right, it's one of 7 states whose economy actually shrank in 2011, ranked 47th in terms of GDP growth. It's one of the highest tax states still, even with all of that. And his taxes don't seem to be doing anything. Mortgage delinquencies have gone way up. Poverty's gone way up. So by any measure, and granted,
Sounds like a good Republican record to me.
Well, yeah, and I'm not a Republican who likes to lie and claim, Bill Clinton, everything that happened in Arkansas was his fault when he ran. And I understand there's other factors going on there in New Jersey. I'm not blaming Christie for everything,
right.
But that's a pretty crappy economic record overall. He certainly hasn't helped things, and if anything, he's made things worse, far worse with his policies. Then you start talking about the cronyism. He's been investigated by the Justice Department. He gave all sorts of contracts to campaign supporters when he was elected. He's had to apologize before for targeting others targeting other rivals of his in terms of his prosecutions as a state attorney. It goes on. The Romney people looked at the portfolio of things that this guy could get in trouble for and said we can't touch him with a 10-foot pole.
He lobbied
Even
for
though,
the
frankly,
financial
to reach
services
him, you'd only
industry
need like a 1-foot pole.
As well. Before he was, in elected office, he was a lobbyist, and he lobbied to exempt Wall Street from New Jersey's anti-fraud consumer protections.
That's right. He was lobbying for Bernie Madoff, which
right.
was nice of him. I mean, has a record of exactly what it is that has caused so much trouble and wrecked our economy. He's a record of crony capitalism, which overturning regulations that are necessary for our economy to function, instead of guys on Wall Street handing each other basically the equivalent of brown bags full of money while telling the rest of us a story that costs us our lives, a life savings. He's shown that propensity while he's been governor of New Jersey, while, as we've pointed out, their economy has done terribly, while he's hurt teachers, he's hurt firemen, he's hurt policemen, he's hurt others, he's gone after public sector unions. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy here that just because there could be no better equivalent than what happened with Rudy Giuliani, who he's even more right-wing than, by the way, because he's also anti-choice, anti-gay marriage, passed, a few gun control or gun safety laws, as I would call them, but then vetoed a bill that he vetoed his own bill that he'd proposed, so you now can still get a sniper rifle for anybody flying out of Newark anytime soon. That might be a concern of yours, that someone can get a sniper rifle and sit 500 yards away and shoot at aircraft. So, I mean, we're talking about now, rifles, 50 calibers that can take down small aircraft. So he's started to bend to the right already in a number of areas. So he's terrible in social policy. But again, Giuliani's approval rating was tanking in New York. 9/11 happened. He had one day where he acted like a human being, or maybe a couple days, hugged people, seemed like he was in control. And that was something that rehabilitated this guy from the ashes. I don't think Christie's numbers had fallen quite as low, but they were in the low 50s, and they were on a downswing. And then what happened in New Jersey. And essentially, he showed that unlike certain other Republicans, he was actually willing to touch a black guy.
Right.
So that was enough for people to say, oh, my God, he's a moderate, because he put his arm around the black president and said, I'll accept funding to not have my people starve and not have my people be homeless. And that changed the entire look, but it didn't change what's underneath with this guy, and that will come out.
I think that this is really important, because the last thing that I think is important to emphasize, and we've been getting at here, is the whole frame of him as as this Republican moderate. And I mean, for me, in my mind, like the last Republican moderate that existed was, Lincoln Chafee, who's now, I think now he was an independent. Now he's actually a Democrat, right? He was an actual Republican centrist in the Senate.
Or Mike Castle.
Or Mike Castle. Right. There were a few people like this.
In Delaware.
And that meant that they had actual distinct policy positions on the environment, on whatever. Chris Christie, to me, again, I think you're right in terms of the politics of a Northeasterner who cannot translate to the rest of the country because of how obnoxious he is, and has been kind of overhyped nationally. The Giuliani parallel is there, but I think in other respects, it strikes me as being a lot like George W. Bush, in the sense that this state record that's incredibly crony, that's ultra right wing, and there's just this agreed upon brand that everybody's perpetuating of moderation that is all in just a tonal stance. It has nothing to do with policy, and it's distinct from, there's the Tea Party crazies, and then there's the crony George W. Bush, Chris Christie Republicans that just want the party to tone it down a little bit so they can privatize Social Security and redetonate the economy.
Right, but in the end, he's going to be the worst of all worlds.
Yes.
I will say here right now, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. I will say here he has no chance in the Republican primaries.
Yeah, I agree.
And here's the thing: is he's actually quite right wing on a number of issues, which are going to come out, which northeastern moderates and others are going to get angry about and not like when they find out more about his record on issues like choice and on issues like gay marriage and on other issues which they don't really, people who are lower information don't know about. So the reality is he's really right-wing, and some of his biggest support has come from crossover Democrats, independents, moderate Republicans. When his real record comes out, that's going to change that. Yet, the beautiful thing about him is that the few areas where he has actually realistically been semi-moderate, which is and not moderate, sane, let's call it, accepting money for Sandy, being in favor of some form of immigration reform, in favor of a few forms of gun safety legislation.
Speaking out on Islamophobia.
Believing in global warming.
Yeah.
Global warming, immigration, and gun control are all non-starters with the Tea Party. You're done.
Right.
You can't have been in favor of any of that stuff. And here's the thing. You can hide from that stuff and say, oh, I've changed. You can pull a Mitt Romney all you want. Here's what you can't do. Just ask Charlie Crist down in Florida. You can't get rid of images of you with your arm around the black president. And if you don't think, when they're listing all of these things about him, his support for various gun regulation, his support for even for civil unions, frankly, which is not nearly far enough, which is just splitting the baby in half. It doesn't make anybody happy, but it's certainly going to piss off right-wing Tea Partiers and evangelicals. His past support for immigration reform and admitting global warming's happening. Well, you combine that with the image they're going to put in those ads, because those are the ads that I would cut if I were them, with him having it, which they did to Charlie Crist over the stimulus in Florida and destroyed Crist in the Republican Party, him with his arm around Obama. Forget about it. He's done.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Forget about it. And you know what? That's my segue to the final thing I will tell you, which is, I will give this to you as someone, and you brought up the Northeast and everything. The media being centralized in New York and Washington, and I don't say this with any sort of disrespect to people who've lived their lives in New York or lived their lives in Washington. I am a born and bred New Yorker, and I still love New York. I lived for 8 years in Washington, D.C. I went to college in Philadelphia. I spent most of my life in the Northeast, but I will tell you this as somebody who's now lived in the Midwest for a couple of years, which is that Chris Christie yelling at people, berating people in their face, loudmouth thing, it doesn't play.
Right.
In places like where I live.
Oh, totally.
It's not considered charming. It's considered obnoxious, even among people that might agree with him politically. It's considered rude. It was the problem with Giuliani, and then you add in the ethnic component of it, which is not fair, but is just being honest with you, which is you're talking about evangelical voters who have to look at an Italian Catholic, who fits the stereotype of the Sopranos. And I'm telling you, there will be a lot of people that will just be viscerally uncomfortable with him. So when you combine everything we've just talked about, from the crony capitalism to the personality issues in the Midwest and South that aren't going to play, to the fact that he's been too chummy with Obama and too, quote-unquote, moderate or sane on issues that Tea Party will freak out about, to Northeasterners finding out that he really is much more right-wing than they think, add all that up, I will tell you right now, the dude's not making it through Republican primaries. And if he made it to a general election, he would be killed. But he won't, because he's not making it through the primaries.
I agree with you 100%, and I'd only add that he also spoke out really eloquently, and I will always give him credit for this on Islamophobia in New Jersey, which is like the last
another thing.
That's another thing you could.
And you're right, and he should get that to his credit, like he did for supporting immigration reform and a few other things.
But that's going to kill him in a primary.
That's going to kill him among the Tea Party. That's a brilliant point, Michael, that I forgot. I mean, it's none of that. Let's see how that plays in the South Carolina primary.
Absolutely.
And the Republicans right now are talking about, well, we need to add Midwestern primaries, because that will help more. That we've lost the Midwest lately. It's more moderate in the South, whatever. I'm telling you, in places like Indiana and Michigan and rural parts of Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, where you've got a lot of the constituency that votes Republican, Chris Christie's attitude, the way he behaves, ain't going to play.
The summary is going to be like, why is he yelling at me when he hugged the black guy? That's more like a Canada accent, but you get my point.
That's exactly right.